Play it safe or take a risk. Two potential paths available to the Sacramento Kings this offseason with two names attached. Play it safe with Kyle Kuzma. Take a risk with Brandon Ingram. What about a third secret wild card option? I have all three for you. We'll break them down right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for an instant deposit match up to $100. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. Risk versus playing it safe, right? These are decisions that we all make in life, and the Sacramento Kings have to decide if now is the right time to go for it or if they can improve while not throwing everything at the wall without going all in, right? And there are two names that reportedly have been made available this offseason: Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma. We're going to look at both of those names. We're going to break them down. Ingram, why he's the more risky option with the higher reward. Kyle Kuzma, why he's the safer option who can absolutely still help this Kings team get to where they want to go. We'll look at the pros and cons. I also have a trade package for both of those players of what I would feel comfortable with the Kings offering. I'm not saying the other side would accept it, but what the Kings should offer or be willing to offer in order to trade for that player. So we're going to start with Brandon Ingram and the risk. Then we'll go to Kyle Kuzma and the safe. But like I said in the introduction, I have a third wild card option. It's a guy we've talked about before. It's a guy that I would absolutely love to have here in Sacramento. It's a guy that the Kings would 100% have to go all in to get. He's not being made or reported as available, but reading the tea leaves and the comments of his owner, maybe, just maybe, he could be available. I'm going to keep it vague and I'm going to keep it secret until the final segment. But roll with me until we get there, right? Because let's talk about the risk of Brandon Ingram. Let's talk about with the potentially high reward. Let's talk about kind of the safety of Kyle Kuzma and if the Kings should pursue these routes. Like I said, we're starting with Ingram. We're talking about the risk. Between these two, Ingram and Kuzma, if the Kings are looking for a more immediate impact, noticeable boost to this team right away, someone who next season can get this team from their 9th seed and 46 wins to over the 50 win mark and hopefully amongst the top 4 seeds again in the Western Conference, and a team that legitimately not just will make it out of the first round, but could potentially make a little bit of a push, Brandon Ingram is more of that guy than Kyle Kuzma is. He is. Like, if we're looking at it that way, he absolutely is. So if you're just looking at pure immediate impact and who's the better player to go out and help this Kings team get as good as they can possibly be or improve as much as they possibly can in one summer, Brandon Ingram is the guy for you. But he comes with some risks. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But both of these guys, but especially Brandon Ingram, perfectly fits what this Kings team needs more of. I've talked about it a lot this offseason already, right? This team has a significant lack of wing depth. They need more guys that are 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", who are long, athletic, 7-foot wingspans, who can close out on the perimeter, who can hold their own on the defensive end, who can also stretch the floor. But what Brandon Ingram does on top of all of that is something that this Kings roster, yes, their offensive loaded roster, needs more of. And that's someone who can go out and just get them a bucket. De'Aaron Fox is that guy, and Malik Monk was kind of the other guy that was, Kings need a bucket, give the ball to one of the two of them. But typically that is De'Aaron Fox's role. They're hoping that Keegan Murray can develop into that, right? They want Domantas Sabonis. We all want Domantas Sabonis to kind of show more of that game from time to time too, especially for the money he's being paid. But Brandon Ingram is a guy that immediately comes in and says, if you need a bucket, whether Fox is in the game or out of the game, he's facing a double team, whatever the circumstance might be, run a clear out isolation set for Brandon Ingram from long range, from the mid range, let him attack the basket wherever. He's a 3-level scorer. He will go out and get you buckets. That doesn't mean that he has to be the leading scorer on the team. I wouldn't expect him to be. That doesn't mean that he has to be the first option or even second option offensively all the time. He does not have to be. But whether it's late in the shot clock, late in a quarter, late in the game, you need a bucket. Brandon Ingram can go out and can get you one. He would immediately go right up there with De'Aaron Fox as the go-to, gotta-have-it scorers for this Kings team in important situations. When you gotta have a bucket, give the ball to either Fox or Ingram, and it gives them more versatility, gives them more options. It does take a lot of the scoring load off of Domantas Sabonis, so Sabonis can more naturally, I think, fill that role of wanting to be a facilitator over a scorer because of Ingram and the amount of points that Ingram is capable of putting up, and it gives Keegan more time. You go out and you get Brandon Ingram, you're still wanting a boost and jump from Keegan. You're wanting to continue to see his development on the offensive end and Keegan continue to turn into that go-to scorer that you believe he can be in his third year and beyond. But you're not reliant upon that. At this point in time, right, if the Kings are going into this season, this upcoming season, and they don't go out and get another go-to scorer, they are significantly relying on not just the continued growth of Fox and Sabonis, they're very much relying on Keegan Murray to take another leap, but this time on the offensive end, this time with being able to get his own shot and create off the dribble, things that Keegan hasn't really shown in his first 2 years in the league. Bringing in Brandon Ingram means Brandon can kind of take that responsibility on, and Keegan, while he hopefully can continue to develop, if he is still more of a catch-and-shoot three-point poacher and three-point merchant who every once in a while will attack the basket and try and get to the rim and finish around the rim, great. You can get away with that a lot more on the offensive end. Brandon last season averaged 20 points on 49% from the field, 35% from three-point range, and 80% shooting from the free throw line. He also averaged 5 rebounds and 5 assists a game. So he's a guy that can get you a little bit of everything. In fact, I'd say 5 assists and 5 rebounds is more than a little bit. He's a guy that can help facilitate because he draws so much attention. He's long, so he can help on the glass. He doesn't have to take rebounds away from Domantas Sabonis, but any help that you can give Sabonis on the glass, especially when he's being boxed out and facing even double-team box outs, if Ingram can get in there and get you some boards and help you secure those rebounds, that's certainly a boost. Of course, the offense is what speaks through. And here's what's good for Brandon Ingram last season. He played the most games last season that he's played since his rookie year. Now, that number was 64. It's not great. It's not phenomenal, but it's not terrible at all. 64 games for Brandon Ingram is fantastic. That's the most since he played 79 his rookie year. In between that, he had seasons of 59, 52, 62, 61, 55, and then the season before last, he had only 45 games played. So there are some injury risks. There are some injury concerns. That is part of the risk to Brandon Ingram, but certainly not the main part. But last season, he played the most games that he's played since he first came into the league. That is an encouraging sign. But what is the major risk with Brandon Ingram? He's in the last year of his deal. $36 million. The reason why the Pelicans are reportedly making Brandon Ingram available is because they don't want to have to pay him. Because they're trying to go in another direction and they think they're kind of capped out with this team as it is right now. And if they were to keep him and pay him, they're just keeping themselves stuck in this picture that they don't believe is going to be good enough to win. Brandon Ingram could come to the Sacramento Kings, play here for 1 year, and walk away. And then the Sacramento Kings are left with the assets, or they no longer have the assets that they traded away. And now they have, once again, a big gap in their roster, right? That is the risk that you are taking with this Brandon Ingram situation. The reward is you know what type of player he is. You know how he can come out and he can get you a bucket and he addresses your need. But he's only guaranteed to address it for 1 year. There's no guarantee that he's going to sign a new contract to come back and continue to play for you. Now, you took that risk to some extent when you did the Tyrese Halliburton, Domantas Sabonis trade. The only difference with that is you had 2 years with Domantas to make it right right? You had 2 years to convince him to stay. Thankfully, it didn't take very long. The Kings had success right away, and that's fantastic. If the Kings bring Brandon Ingram in, next season needs to go well. Because if next season doesn't go well, Brandon's going to walk. He's going to go find an opportunity elsewhere, whether he chases the bag or chases the opportunity to be on a more like stable winning franchise, whatever it may be. Who knows what the circumstances are. If you go out and get Brandon Ingram, you have to be as confident as you possibly can that you're going to be able to get him back. Because a 1-year rental, Brandon Ingram, as much as I like him and as much as I think he can improve this roster, this is not a Kawhi Leonard situation in Toronto. Brandon Ingram coming to Sacramento doesn't instantly turn the Kings into a title favorite where they can win the title, Brandon can leave, and they can still feel good because they got a championship and it's worth it. That's not the circumstance we're talking about here. So you lose Brandon Ingram, you're potentially really, really stuck. There also, this season, there were some reports of, I don't know if attitude issues are the right thing, but he was certainly unhappy at times with his role as not the main guy, right? He was kind of second fiddle to second fiddle to Zion Williamson at times, second fiddle at times to CJ McCollum, so he wasn't exactly happy with his role. I think it's not necessarily grasping at straws. I think I'm working too hard to connect negative dots to suggest, he'd come to Sacramento and feel the same way. He wouldn't want to back up or be the second option to De'Aaron Fox or wouldn't want to take less shots than Keegan Murray some game, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think I'm working too hard to be negative if that's how I feel. But it is worth bringing up and it is worth discussing. Really, this whole conversation is get better immediately, but take the risk of it only being a short-term rental. Is that worth it, especially for what you would have to give up? Now, here is what I would be willing to give up. Like, this is the trade where I have no idea if the Pelicans say yes to this. No clue. I'm not even going to pretend that they are going to say yes. And Brandon Ingram being available, he's going to have suitors. The Pelicans are going to have options. There are going to be teams that are interested in trading for Brandon. I have no idea what his value is. I have no idea how desperate any team is to get him on their roster. That, of course, changes things. But here's a deal that I would be comfortable with the Kings making for Ingram, or an offer for the Kings to put out there. So the Kings would get Brandon Ingram in this deal. The Pelicans would get Harrison Barnes and his $18 million per year. Sasha Vezenkov with his, I think, $6 million per year. Both of them still have 2 years left on their deals. Chris Duarte, who is an expiring deal next season. The 13th pick, so this trade would happen on trade night or on draft night, and a 2027 first-round pick. I didn't put protections or anything on it because we're not getting that far into the weeds. If there's protections, great. If there's not, whatever. Basically, we're talking about 2 first-rounders, Harrison Barnes, Sasha Vezenkov, Chris Duarte for Brandon Ingram. I'm not comfortable including another first-round pick. I don't think Brandon Ingram is worth 3 first-rounders, and you have to include either Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter in this deal to make the money work. Plus, the Pelicans are not tanking. They're still trying to be good. So they're going to want a player back that is going to at least help them a little bit in the short term. I'm sure as hell not including Keegan Murray in any kind of Brandon Ingram deal. I've made that very clear with episodes earlier this week. I'm not including Keegan Murray at all, and if that's where the conversation ends, that's where the conversation ends. If the Pelicans say, we're not trading you Brandon Ingram unless Keegan Murray is involved, end the conversations there. Don't waste your time or anybody else's, and move on to the next option. I'm not, very clearly, not including Keegan Murray in any Brandon Ingram trade, and I'm not going more than 2 first-round draft picks. If you want to sprinkle in some seconds in there, if that makes a difference, fine. I'm not including I'm not including 3 first-round draft picks in a Brandon Ingram trade. So this is what I'd comfortable doing. I have no idea if they'd say yes. If you like the trade, great. If you don't, great. You want to respond to anything we're talking about, feel free to do so. You can do so in the YouTube comment section down below if you're watching. If you're listening, hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. So Brandon Ingram is the risk. Kyle Kuzma is the safer route. And I'll break that down as to why in just a second. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 way to play daily fantasy sports with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. We're talking about Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma, right? So let's say it's the regular season, right? And you're playing a night of Prize Picks. You don't have to pick two teams that are playing one another. You could pick a smattering of teams and a smattering of different games depending upon how much you're paying attention to or how confident you are in your picks. But the way it works, let's say you pick Brandon Ingram to score more than 26.5 points, and you pick Kyle Kuzma to hit more than 2.5 threes, and you partner that with De'Aaron Fox having more than 2.5 steals, right? You hit on all those, cha-ching, you're making money. There's so many fun and creative ways for you to play, especially during the NBA season, but you can also partner with MLB baseball if you want to play with the playoffs and MLB games going on at the same time right now. Even NHL playoffs, get involved with that. WNBA, college athletics, when football season is back, they have amazing football picks for you. Prize Picks is so much fun. It's creative, and it's just a fun way for you to enjoy your sports to another level and make money while enjoying it. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA or download the app and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. So you deposit $100, you get $100 instantly, no questions asked. You deposit $50, you get $50 instantly, no questions asked. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Why is Kyle Kuzma safe? Because he's kind of the opposite of the risks of Brandon Ingram. But let's talk about Kyle Kuzma, the player, first and foremost. Kyle Kuzma has been connected to the Kings for years. I don't know if that's from his camp and his interest, or if that's from the Kings' interest. I think that certainly has something to do with it, because the Kings have needed and been the Kings have been looking for players like Kyle Kuzma for a while. Yes, they've been looking for players like Kyle Kuzma for a while. He makes the Kings better 100%, but not significantly. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because the Kings might not feel, based off of their end-of-season press conference comments that we've talked a lot about here on Locked On Kings this summer. Monty McNair, Mike Brown's talking about how close this team was. They might not feel that they need to make a significant addition this offseason. Kyle Kuzma is a very, very solid acquisition if the Kings can get it. Of course, it depends on what they're giving up, but Kyle Kuzma improves this roster. If you bring Kyle Kuzma in without getting rid of any of your core players, you are a better basketball team, 100%. But Kyle Kuzma doesn't moonshot you into higher playoff expectations, I think, the same way that Brandon Ingram does. And I know, again, Brandon Ingram to me doesn't make the Kings instant contenders, or shouldn't be. The Kings should not be considered instant contenders if Brandon Ingram is on this roster with this core. But he's expected to be really, really good, and the Kings are therefore expected to be really, 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 really good. Kyle Kuzma comes to this team, and the team is expected to absolutely be better. But they're still reliant on the growth of other guys more so than they would be by bringing in Brandon Ingram, if that makes sense. Kuzma gives them another scoring option. He's not as good of a creator as Ingram. He's someone who can go out and get his own bucket, but not at the same level that Brandon Ingram can, but still he addresses your need of someone who can go out and get you buckets. His role in Washington and his scoring opportunities in Washington, very, very different from what he would get here in Sacramento. So take his stats and his numbers with a grain of salt. To me, what I see Kyle Kuzma as is, whether Harrison Barnes is involved in the deal or not, to me, Kyle Kuzma takes over the Harrison Barnes role. He is an instantly better scorer than Harrison Barnes. Of course, he's younger than Harrison Barnes. And defensively, I think it's a push. If there's an edge, maybe Harrison gets it. Like, I've never, in conversations about Kyle Kuzma over the years, I've never, ever heard conversation about Kyle being a good to great defender. I've also never heard conversation about Kyle being a bad defender, which means he's probably just average. And if he's just average defensively, that's about the same as Harrison Barnes, with the offensive boost that he gives you and fits more of the timeline of the Sacramento Kings, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. The Kings would be reliant upon Kyle Kuzma to fill a role, though. Brandon Ingram comes in, and Ingram has a role to play, but Ingram is more of a feature part of your offense. You figure out how to feature Brandon Ingram more. Kuzma is a role player. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because he's a really, 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 really good role player. And you can be a role player as a starter, right? He's a guy that at times will catch fire, and the Kings will lean on him to win them a basketball game. But he's not a guy that the Kings are going to turn to consistently in big moments to help them get wins, compared to a Brandon Ingram, certainly compared to a De'Aaron Fox, right? So Kyle Kuzma comes in, is an upgrade on that Harrison Barnes spot, 100%. The Kings still need another jump from Keegan and other jumps from other players on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Last season, he averaged 22 points, so technically he averaged more than Brandon Ingram, but again, we can kind of take that for what it's worth. Brandon Ingram averaged 20 on a playoff team in the Pelicans. Kyle Kuzma averaged 22 for one of the worst teams in the league in Washington. He shot 46% from the field, only 33% from three-point range. It's not terrible, but you would like to see that number higher. 77% from the free throw line. Does average 6 rebounds and 4 assists per game. I was reading a lot about how people think that his playmaking and his assisting is actually underrated. And in an offense that's free-flowing, they like to move the basketball. I'm sure the Kings would enjoy that. Here is where Kyle Kuzma is a lot more enticing to so many people, maybe including Kings executives, than Brandon Ingram is. Kyle Kuzma has 3 years left on his deal. Not only that, he is on a really, really good contract. It goes down every single year. Next season, it's worth $23 million. The season after that, it's worth $21 million. The final season is $19 million. Remember, the NBA is about to sign a historically lucrative, ridiculous deal, a television deal, right? Salary cap is going to keep going up and up and up and up and up every year. You have a featured starter player while the salary cap keeps going up, and you have to worry about paying Keegan and worry about Fox's extension and other players that you're trying to bring in. Kuzma's just going to go down and down and down and down. That either makes him easier to hold on to, or that makes his contract easier to trade if you do need to upgrade that position down the line. So he gives you more flexibility, and flexibility has been a big word from general manager Monte McNair in his time here in Sacramento. Kuzma is also under contract for 3 years. So you can bring Kuzma in. Again, you're not expecting as much of an immediate impact as you're getting from Brandon Ingram, but Kuzma comes in, and you know he's here for a while, and you know that the pieces that you're giving up are not going to go to waste, and it's not going to turn into just a 1-year rental. Doesn't mean the trade's guaranteed to work out. It could still be a failure, but it's not going to be a failure because you just lose that player after 1 year, right? Kuzma is a lot safer of an option. But are the Kings in a position right now, with how good the Western Conference is, are the Kings in a position right now where playing it safe is the right thing to do? Or with the state of the West and with the Kings in win now mode like they say they are, is it time to go for it? Here's the trade package that I'm looking at with Kyle Kuzma. Actually, it's a couple of them. Kings get Kyle Kuzma for Kevin Huerter, Chris Duarte, and the 13th overall pick this year. So it's a draft night trade again. Important to note, reportedly, the Wizards were shopping Kyle Kuzma at the trade deadline last season, and his starting price was 2 first-rounders. He didn't have any suitors. People were interested. People aren't going to give up 2 first-rounders for Kyle Kuzma. 1 first-rounder, though, now we're talking. So you give up 13, you give up Kevin Huerter, you give up Chris Duarte. Why did I pick Huerter over Barnes? Because Huerter has $2 million left on his contract per year than Barnes does. And I think the Washington Wizards are in the business of trying to save themselves money for a rebuild. So you go out, you move on from Huerter. You also include Chris Duarte in there, who's an expiring deal, so he's off the books by the end of the year. That is the route that the Wizards could take if they still want to get a player that can keep them somewhat competitive or a decent player. We know Kevin Huerter is a good player. Plus, that contract is easy to move in the future if they want to. But if the Wizards want all expiring deals, like they want a pick and they want money to come off of their books, then you could go Trey Lyles, Davion Mitchell, and Chris Duarte and the 13th pick for Kuzma. Now, I personally, if I'm the Wizards, I'm asking for that second package more than the first package. Trey Lyles, good player, would hate to see him go. Davion Mitchell, good young player that they'll be able to extend for not a boatload of money, could help them going forward. I like Davion Mitchell. The way he ended last season, I thought was fantastic for the Sacramento Kings. I know for a fact the Kings don't want to get rid of him. And then Chris Duarte, who's whatever. If I'm the Wizards, I'm asking for that deal. If I'm the Kings, I'm trying to avoid that deal. But if it got to a point where the Wizards said, no, we're not doing Herter Duarte in 13, but we will do all those expirings for 13, I think the Kings would have to strongly, strongly consider saying yes. Safe with Kuzma, risk with Brandon Ingram. You ready for the wild card? I'll share that in just a second. And the wild card is Mikal Bridges. Now, before all of you go, that one, Matt, that option, forget the other two. Mikal Bridges, bring him in Sacramento. I feel that energy. I understand that. I hear ya. Why is this a wild card when this could be the best option and most ideal option for the Sacramento Kings? Why is this the wild card compared to the other two? Well, because we don't know for sure that the Nets want to move on from him. I don't think they're in a position where they'll ever say definitively he is not available for trade unless they were posturing. But we don't know if and how willing they are to move on from Bridges and what the asking price will be. We can only speculate. However, we have some recent comments in an interview, and I tweeted these out. You can find them on my Twitter, @MattGeorgeSack. This is from the Nets owner, Joe Tsai. He said that the franchise is at a crossroads, and he talked a lot about going for it and how that can hurt the franchise and hurt the organization trying to rush a win versus trying to build for more long-term, sustainable success. He used words like long-term approach and competing in the long run. Those are words that he used in this clip that I tweeted. So that has opened the door to speculation that if the Nets are looking for more long-term success, if they're looking for more of a slower approach, if they want to build from the ground up and build a core that can turn into something 3-4 years down the road, not only does Bridges, who's in his prime, not exactly fit with that right now, but Bridges could potentially get you the assets that you need to really get that rebuild ball rolling. So, he's the wild card. Let's speculate. If Mikal Bridges is at all available at 28 years old, owed $23 million this year and $24.9 million next year. If he's available, this is the move for the Kings to go all in on. If you want to go all in this summer, if it's about trying to become a championship team as soon as possible, if you are truly about it is a win now window and we're going for it today, Mikal Bridges is the best realistic option out there. You're gonna have to convince the Nets. You're gonna have to with what you're offering. And I promise you, if he is even remotely available again, other teams are going to be trying to do the exact same thing. So you have to beat some offers. That means you have to go deep into your pockets to make this deal happen. We'll get to that a little bit. If you add Bridges to this core, which we're talking about, Fox, Sabonis, and Keegan Murray, if your big four is Fox, Sabonis, Bridges, and Murray, the Kings can only expect to be contenders. Now, what do I mean by that? That does not mean that they're guaranteed to win a championship. That does not mean that to start next season, the Kings should be looked at as a top 3 seed and a team that is expected to be in the Western Conference Finals minimum. That's not what that means. Again, Bridges is under contract for the next couple of years. But if you are going all in for a player to add them to your core, you have to believe that that core has the potential to actually legitimately win a championship. Not just words during media day and preseason at the beginning of the year when you're optimistic. No, you're looking at this roster and you're going, we are selling our future to put this core together because we believe it will be worth it with a title by the end of it. At least one title. That's what an all-in move is. So if the Kings were to pull off this move, it is not a guarantee that they are a championship team. It does not mean that they should be looked at immediately as a legit championship contender, but this organization only makes this move if they truly feel that core is going to win them a title. If there's any hesitancy, you probably don't make the offer or make the move of what it's going to take to get Bridges here. We're talking next season, you want to expect or look forward to an OKC or Timberwolves level jump to the top of the Western Conference. That's what you're hoping for, and maybe even expecting with Mikal Bridges and a deal this offseason. Bridges averaged 19 points, shot 43% from the field, 37% from three-point range, 81% from the free throw line, averaged 4 rebounds and 3 assists for the Nets last season. He played all 82 games, so he is available, which is beautiful. And he is when you're talking about his physical measurements, his size, his length, he is, to a T, exactly what the Kings are looking for. Exactly. And with his defense and his skill set on the defensive end to boot, I don't know if there is a more perfect player who is potentially available. There are dream players out there, players that you would love to have on this Kings roster, but their availability is it's a pipe dream. Mikal Bridges kind of does feel like a pipe dream, but the Nets' circumstances open the door to maybe they'll actually listen. Maybe they really will consider going this route. And that's where you have to pick up the phone and you have to make them really consider. What is the deal? I have no idea if the Nets say yes to this. No idea. But here's the offer. Here's what I'm starting with. Kings get Bridges. Nets get their pick of Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter, whichever one they want more. $18 million for 2 more years of Harrison Barnes, $18 million a year, or $16 million a year for 2 more years of Kevin Huerter. They want the shooter, they want the wing, or the forward. They go out and pick. Their pick of either Keon Ellis or Davion Mitchell. Throw in a solid young player who's low money, who can help that team right away, who kind of fits that timeline of not completely rebuilding necessarily, but a younger player who can be a part of building a new core and building a new culture going forward in Brooklyn. Yeah, it would suck to get rid of one of those players, especially if that player was Keon Ellis. But again, you got to do stuff like this to get this deal done. Throw Chris Duarte in there to make the money work, and he's an expiring contract. They can decide what they want to do with him with that. And then 3 first-round picks. 13 this year. Again, this is a draft night trade. 13, 2027, and 2029 first-round picks. You can make both those picks unprotected for all I care. 3 first-rounders I absolutely would have on the table for Mikal Bridges. Would not have a problem with it. You're selling a lot of your future. You're going for it. This is an all-in move. 3 first-round picks have to be available. Now, listen to me very carefully when I say this, because I did a podcast 2 episodes ago titled Keep Keegan Murray's Name Out Your Trade Talks. These are the trade talks where you humor and you listen to Keegan Murray being involved. But hear me very clearly. I'm not trying to trade Keegan Murray in this deal, but if you're the Sacramento Kings and the Nets counter and say, we're listening, put Keegan Murray in that deal, then the Kings are going, okay, we put Keegan Murray in that deal, we're taking 2 first-round picks off the table. That's my feeling. And maybe the Nets say no, but there's no shot in hell that the Nets are getting 3 first-rounders and a package revolving around Keegan Murray. No chance. Now, Keegan Murray and 1 first-rounder and a Keon or a Davion or whatever and salary to match or whatever, if that's what they're asking for, Kings have to really strongly consider it, because as much as I love Keegan and believe in what Keegan can turn into, you are hoping that Keegan turns into what Mikal Bridges is. And Mikal Bridges is young, under contract for 2 more years. You don't have to worry about paying Keegan anymore in that situation, and you use that money to extend Bridges down the road. That is one of those realistic deals where I legitimately think about moving on from Keegan Murray. It is an all-in move. Again, you only make this move if you truly believe that this core can get you to contend. If you don't feel like that can happen, you probably bow out of these trade talks. But he's a wild card in this entire situation. Risk, Brandon Ingram. Safe, Kyle Kuzma. Wild card / all in, Mikal Bridges. Which route do you think the Kings should take? Which route do you take? Put your general manager hat on. And if you like these deals that I put out there, say that you like them or which one you would accept or turn down. If you want to submit your own deal to me, do so. Again, at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. If you want any of these names, one in particular, tell me one and why. And I look forward to having you joining me on the next episode. My name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.